Good morning, it's February 21st, and this is To My Liberal Friends. The left wing of the Democratic Party has found a couple of things to rally around, and once again they demonstrate they've lost touch with the voters of Middle America. They remain tethered to the liberals in urban cities who think their food's produced in a supermarket and the electricity they use comes from a socket in the wall. It's all they need to know because they're blithely living their special lives. The first rallying point is Trump's effort to cut down the size of the federal government. As someone that spent his entire professional life working around the Congress and the bureaucracy, I can say with firsthand knowledge and experience that the government's become bloated and outsized. Programs, many with well-meaning objectives in the beginning, get funded and they take on a life of their own. Those administering the funds appropriated by Congress decide how they will be spent, and their own pet projects take root and get funded year after year. All the hullabaloo about what's being done at USAID shows just how bad the problem can become. There were a lot of important things being funded by this agency, but at the same time there were a lot of waste. How this worked was they would fund their favorite NGO, usually run by someone that left the Democratic administration, and the NGO would then spend the money the way they wanted it, and there was almost zero accountability. When Elon Musk and his group started pulling the cover off some of this, they found that too much of the funds were being spent not on what the American public would want it spent on, but rather what these left-wing apparatchiks felt they wanted to spend it on. And I've gone through that list before, and if you've been paying attention, you've seen them listed in the media as well. But in a reflex reaction, out come the protesters with their signs and chants. They decry any cuts in spending, and they're especially outraged that a new administration would begin downsizing the federal bureaucracy. Now, as I mentioned earlier, based on my experience in Washington, I could walk through just about any agency and cut the staffing level by 10 to 15%, and nobody would notice they were gone. But the bureaucracy has dug in, and they have come to think they are the government, and they are the ones that should be making these decisions about spending and governing. During the Reagan administration, my brother was the chief of staff at the Department of Health and Human Services. Early on, he was in a meeting with some senior career people and was outlining the direction the department would be taking under the new secretary. It was obvious to him that many in the room were not happy with the changes being proposed. One senior GS-16 looked at him and said, quote, "I was here before you got here. I will be here when you're gone. I don't really care what you think," end quote. Now, in a normal business world, in the private sector, that person would be fired on the spot. But firing someone at that level in the bureaucracy would take a long time. And you can bet that GS-16 did his darndest to make sure the new direction was not implemented. The Democrats forget that two of their icons, Bill Clinton and Barack Obama, were doing some of the very things Trump is trying to do. Clinton offered $25,000 buyouts, trying to reduce the federal workforce. He did this with the support of a Republican Congress, just as he passed welfare reform with the Republican Congress. Clinton was the ultimate politician and knew how to determine where the wind was blowing and how to react. Obama was often referred to as the deporter-in-chief, but that's forgotten by those on the left. The second rallying cry is that Trump is changing the names of some things. Now, being honest, I disagree with him on changing the name of the largest mountain back to Mount McKinley. It should be Mount Denali because that's what the people of Alaska want it to be. Leave it alone. He's also changed the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. Again, not that important to me, but both the United States and Mexico are part of North America, and if you look at the coastlines of both countries along the Gulf, they're about equal, so it's not really that big a deal. I especially like that he changed the name of the major military installation in North Carolina back to Fort Bragg, but the Department of Defense named it for Roland Bragg, a World War I hero, so the woke left will have a difficult time protesting the name change. But this group seems to forget all the name changes that took place during the Obama and Biden administration and the huge number of statues and other pieces of history they took down. Teddy Roosevelt was probably the first conservationist that occupied the White House, but somehow he was not to be remembered. Protesters pulled down his statue in front of the New York Museum of Natural History. Out in the state of Washington, Democrats in the state legislature want to remove George Washington from the state flag. Forget the state's named after our first president. They want his image removed because he must have done something to warrant his removal. I'm guessing it was because Washington was a slave owner, something abhorrent but normal in that period of history. I'm waiting for those on the left to start attacking Franklin D. Roosevelt. He has been their god as the father of the federal government explosion, but he's also one that ordered American citizens put into detainment camps based on their nationality. It took Ronald Reagan to finally apologize to the Japanese Americans who had been detained. But the real problem is that Democrats get the bulk of their votes in urban centers, so they don't see any need to travel middle America. When they protest cutting some government agency, they hold their protests in front of government buildings and in cities. On the other hand, Republicans are all over the country. Kristi Noem is riding with Border Patrol agents. The left called her a pretend cowgirl, not realizing she grew up on a ranch in South Dakota. The left will keep on rallying around things that are important to the left wing of their party, and the rest of America will keep on ignoring them and cheering the current administration on. This has been To My Liberal Friends. Thanks for listening.